familiar with which parts you cover. So I'll just kind of go in the order I see things. So Representative Almond, which part of Tuscaloosa County is in your district?
So again, I'm District 63, and this was formerly Bill Poole's district, and it's primarily everything north of the river in the city of Tuscaloosa, city limits. I'm unclear exactly where those boundaries are at the moment because we just changed it, and I haven't gotten a great map yet to see exactly which roads where they divide. But primarily most of everything north of the river in Tuscaloosa, plus south of the river in what we would call sort of university proper area, which is going to be bounded on the west by, I believe, either Lurleen, one of the Lurleens, I believe, or in that vicinity, somewhere downtown. On the south by 15th Street, and on the east by McFarland Boulevard. So it's really that university area, and then most of the campus. In addition to that, there is some portion of it that the last map I saw starts about Snow Hinton Park and kind of goes down south to the interstate. So
okay,
a little bit here, a little bit there.
Okay, Representative England.
So I represent down a little bit down 69 South until you get to about the second traffic light where Plantation Drive is. And then you start working your way towards Skyland Boulevard. You drive all the way up Skyland Boulevard. I go up in the Cottondale area. I get the Belk Activity Center, or Maccabee Center, all the way into where Alberta Baptist Church. And if you're familiar with Mount Pilgrim and also Cornerstone Church, those are all the precincts in my new district. So we'll say down South Tuscaloosa, East Tuscaloosa, and into Alberta.
Okay, and Mr. South.
Yeah, so my portions of Tuscaloosa have changed a little bit, but come down 43 from the Fayette County line to Mitt-Larry, across 69, and kind of stay north of the city for the most part, and then the northeastern portion of the county all the way down and encompass the town of Brookwood as well. So kind of the northeastern portion of the county up to the Fayette County line and then over to the Jefferson County line.
Okay. And Mr. McCampbell, I see you joined us. Welcome. Thank you for coming. And you are muted right now.
Are you talking to me?
Okay. Yeah, no, I was talking to Mr. McCampbell.
Okay, because I got knocked off and I'm just back on. So sorry, AJ, your turn.
All right, I think I'm up. What do you need?
Yes, so we are just starting off familiarizing everyone with which part of Tuscaloosa is in your district.
Oh, okay. I come in through Northport from Pickens County. So I have south of 82 in Northport, all the way up to, it's not quite all the way up to the hospital now. And then I go over into West Tuscaloosa, and I have basically the West Tuscaloosa, the western part of the city of Tuscaloosa, and then I go out west into the county. So that's the part of Tuscaloosa I have. Okay. Now you need to know about the rest of the place. I got probably, if I drive my district, I've got about a 2.5 hour drive from north to south.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Yes, you are quite spread out.
Yes.
Yes. So, Mr. Allen, could you tell us about your district? Oh, you might be muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, good. My current district encompasses Tuscaloosa, 69 South, the University campus, Northport, West Tuscaloosa County, and Brookwood, Coaling, Vance, and Tannehill. Of course, I do have part of Pickens County and the entire county of Lamar, but the new district, basically, I have lost Lamar County and will keep Tuscaloosa and Pickens. So that's probably the good view of my district.
Okay, great. All right, so now we'll get started. As you know, this is kind of more of a conversational event. It's, you know, it's not like a typical forum or whatever. So feel free to jump in, answer if you don't want to answer. If you know you feel like it's already been covered, that's all fine. So we'll just get started with, as I mentioned, a foundational issue of the league is voting rights. So how will you advance voting rights during this legislative session? And we'll start with Mr. South.
You know, I think looking back on the last couple of election cycles, I think Alabama's done a pretty good job. Secretary of State's office does pretty well. Obviously, there's some things to kind of marinate on from the pandemic side of things. Things we did well, things we didn't do so well. And so I'm sure there will be a list of bills filed, you know, whether it be COVID related or not, just the general practices of voting in Alabama. But all in all, I think we are in a pretty good spot. I mean, obviously there's some things that we can work on and improve on, but I don't see necessarily a big push for major overhauls.
Okay. Representative England, do you have comments?
Sure. Representative South mentioned COVID, and I think one of the things that was sort of exposed is that I think we need to have some additional investment in how we absentee vote. I think across the state, we saw courthouses that were inundated with people trying to vote early. And especially with the pandemic, that's, you know, apparently it's never going to end. We need to start taking precautions to make us safer. And the ability to vote absentee easily is a great alternative to everyone showing up at the same time at the same place on the same day. So I think you'll see some proposals in the legislative session, as we've seen in the last few, that will expand the ability to vote absentee. Obviously, I think one of the things we talked about on a regular basis is making sure that, you know, our elections are secure and we have election integrity and everybody can have confidence in the outcome. So as many people have talked about, making sure that there are guardrails there, but at the same time, making sure that it's easy to vote. So I foresee bills coming forward that would allow for early voting, bills coming forward that would allow for expanding absentee, so you don't have to, you know, be quite frank with you, not have to lie and say you're going to be out of town or something so you can vote absentee. I don't think that makes any sense. So no excuse absentee voting, and also making it easier to get ID, voter ID, and so forth. And as Representative South mentioned, you know, you have to give Secretary Merrill a lot of credit in that regard. I think we've got the most registered voters that we've had in Alabama history, and you know, it's quite easy to get an ID if you call them. It's free. So, so just making sure that it's accessible, it's easy, and we provide as many options as possible.
Okay. Anybody else? Representative Allman, McCamp, anybody else have any comments on that?
I think Mr. England's point about the long lines at the courthouse, for absentee voting, and that definitely was an issue. And when we voted last, and so I think staffing was a bit of a problem in the courthouse, and hopefully, those are some measures we can anticipate and hopefully meet those needs ahead of time this time, knowing what's probably coming again. So hopefully that will happen.
And I think I agree with the things that have been said. One of the key issues has been voter ID, and I can tell the story of a young man that didn't have an ID, wasn't a registered voter, and we talked to him and got him as a registered voter, and he was just excited because now he had an opportunity to go and get a job, because all the jobs want some sort of ID. So not only did that, the fact that he could now vote, but the fact that he had an ID that would allow him to go and get a job, I think it says a whole lot for our state that we were on the forefront in terms of getting, the people the ability to get these IDs. Now, when it comes to voting, I think we need to be doing everything we can to encourage people to vote rather than to discourage. There's a lot of things that are going on in our nation and are going to be going on in our state that's going to be trying to discourage people from voting. And the reality is that's not a democratic or the American way as far as I can see it. Why would we want to not have as many people participate in our democracy as we possibly can? So I'll be beating that drum, that because there are going to be some bills, and we've seen some pre-filed bills, I'm sure my colleagues have seen them, that are actually going to be trying to discourage people and make it harder for people to vote. So I'll be out there beating that drum, and I'm sure there's a lot of people not going to like it, but that's okay. I'm still gonna beat it.
And Mr. Allen, do you have any comments?
Yeah. Let me just say, I think AJ has a great point on the photo ID. If you have that photo ID, and when you walk into a polling place, you should not have a problem at all in voting. But I do think that Chris brought up a valid point along with Cynthia, and that is that I was at the courthouse when that line was wrapped around the courthouse, and that was a very serious issue and a problem that needs to be resolved. And I do think that will most likely be addressed. But at the same time, it may be a good time for us to maybe even take a view and look at exactly the precincts. Do we need to expand the precincts? Do we need to add more employees or more people working the polls to make sure that the process, when a citizen walks in those polls, that they'll have the opportunity to get in and out in a good amount of time without standing there 2 or 3, 4 hours. So I do think that is a problem that we need to be very sensitive about as well.
I think also, if you look at the Saturday voting that we did, that was had a lot to do with a lot of lines even on Saturday. So it tells me that our capacity to accommodate the people that honestly want to vote is really stressed for us to all be trying to get there and vote on the same, on one day. So I think that we will need to be looking at some options for additional abilities for people to go and vote. Some people can't get off and they say, well, you know, your employer is supposed to let you off. Okay, yes, he is, but when people are intimidated and need their jobs, then if the employer say you can't go, they don't go vote. So we've got to have some alternatives for those people that honestly want to vote but don't get an opportunity because of the financial issues that they'll be facing. So.
Yeah. Well, some of the abuses that I think that could happen in the process is mail-in ballots, you know, voted by mail. I think that's something that I feel like that's an abuse that has taken place across the country, and it certainly don't need to happen in Alabama.
Well, that's the reason, Gerald, I think you and I are probably on the same page. So when I get this bill to expand the number of days that people can come in and vote, I'm sure you're gonna be right there with me, aren't you?
If they've got an ID, you better believe it.
All right, yeah, everybody heard it.
You're on the record.
That's right. If they got a legitimate ID, a photo ID, that's exactly a good thing to have.
All right.
All right, so as we started off, we covered your districts, you know, which part of Tuscaloosa do you have? So this question, let's talk about redistricting. And if you're satisfied with the plans for your districts that were done by the Permanent Committee on Reapportionment, you know, if you're not satisfied, why not? So let's start with Mr. England.
Bad choice.
I can just see him bursting at the seams.
Oh man, maybe my facial expression gave it away. It was a tortured process. It was an inside-outside process instead of an outside-in, meaning that the people in charge, the folks that were responsible for putting the districts together, drew them before they had any regard for what's best for the people they represent. And I make that point because I'll just use the city of Tuscaloosa, for example. The city of Tuscaloosa was used to build population for districts. So you've got people being drug in from all over West Alabama who have just as much interest outside of the county, outside of the city, as they do in the city. So if the city, for example, has 100,000 people in it, then, you know, basic math tells you that, you know, we could take 2 representatives and 1 senator. But instead, the city of Tuscaloosa has 3 senators and 6 representatives. And in 2000, in this upcoming election cycle, we'll be back to 10 legislative delegation members for a county that only has 200,000 people in it, which is just ridiculous. And, you know, as much as I love Kyle South and my uncle AJ, you know, and Kyle's laughing because I don't want to throw him under the bus because I think he does a fantastic job. But to ask him to represent the interest of the members of West Jefferson County, North Tuscaloosa County, and I think most of Fayette County, it's not fair to him as a representative, but it's also very difficult for the people that he represents because, for example, the community service grant that he gets to take care of his schools in his district, he's got to split it so many different ways, it's unbelievable. And as far as the west side of Tuscaloosa, which was something that was very important to me, because when District 70, where I represent, was created, the base of it was the west side of Tuscaloosa. So from 1983 up until 2022, the District 70 that was created to represent the west side of Tuscaloosa no longer represents the west side of Tuscaloosa anymore. So again, as much as I love AJ, that's my uncle. He lives about an hour and a half away from Tuscaloosa. And District 72, which was based in the Black Belt, now also in 2022 will cover half of the west side of Tuscaloosa. So the people who live in West Tuscaloosa now don't have a local representative. They've got to call somebody that either lives in Greensboro or Gallion, Alabama. So, and those folks, again, AJ and Ralph Howard, who currently represents District 72, or whoever represents 72 in the future, is going to have to figure out a way to balance the needs of an urban West Tuscaloosa and a rural Marengo County, for example, or Greene County. So for us to be more effective in the people that we represent, the districts need to be more centered on populations that have shared interest. And instead of taking into account what protects incumbents, we really should, this process should really be driven by what best fits the needs of the people. And that's actually the G-rated version of what I said during the legislature.
Very well said, Chris.
So
Well, I will make this comment. Chris is more welcoming to me in the delegation than my counterparts are in Jefferson County. So I just want everybody to make that note.
But and that is true. We love Kyle. But I will say also, I want to point this out too. And Representative, Cynthia Allman, she, for what it's worth, is the only member of the Tuscaloosa legislative delegation that lives in the city of Tuscaloosa. Think about it. I mean, that is amazing to think about. A city that has 200,000 people has 10 legislative representatives. But we're not unique. Mobile suffers from the same thing. Birmingham suffers from the same thing. Huntsville suffers from the same thing. Montgomery suffers from the same thing too. So again, that's just, a pet peeve of mine. I think there's a better way to do the process. I think it should be more organic. It should be driven by the people from the beginning and finished by the politicians at the end versus the other way around. And, hopefully as we kind of work our way through this process, because there's several lawsuits, there are always going to be lawsuits regarding redistricting, but eventually we get to a place where we set aside incumbency protection and start putting together communities of interest so that our legislators can be more effective for who they represent.
Anybody else? Representative Allman, I know you said you weren't quite sure of your map yet, and
It's kind of embarrassing to say, but it's true. And my district is so dense that so the special session where we did the redistricting was my first and only foray into the legislature. And so I was down there for a full week and got a really good taste of things, I think, because we were down there so long. And so that was very helpful to me. And I learned, I think, a good deal about the process, just being there day in and day out. The frustrating part for me is because my district is so dense, that the maps that they used on the floor of the House to demonstrate what our boundaries are were pretty useless to me because I could not see. And of course, it kept changing day by day a little bit. And so even when you go online to look at the new maps, it's very frustrating to find the correct map that we voted in. So, but I say all that to say my district is dense and it didn't change a whole lot during the process, and I'm very satisfied with my district. I think it's pretty makes pretty good sense geographically, and it's a fairly diverse district, but I do think it makes some geographical sense the way it's set up. So I'm pleased.
And
So,
I want to, before I want to say to just to be fair, because none of us got the benefit of looking at the map prior to us arriving in Montgomery. The only benefit that we got was to look at our proposed district, which when you look at the boundaries of it is meaningless because, it's just important to know what the districts next to you look like is what your district looks like, because that's how you tell your precincts. That's how you tell who's voting, who doesn't. So you need to know not only who you're representing, but also who your neighbors are representing. It's very important in the process. And, you know, I made a lot of people angry because, you know, as soon as I served on the redistricting committee, I think Kyle served, and I think Gerald served too. You know, they gave us our maps, they emailed them to us, and they were the same thumbnail sort of map that everybody has now. You cannot legitimately tell what streets, where your boundaries are, unless you use an outside third-party app to do it. So, you know, I think I made a lot of people angry because as soon as I got my maps, I tweeted them out, you know, because the only way that people were going to be involved in the process is to be able to tell me, well, the hell, why am I now in this district? And I, you know, beforehand I was here, and people were contacting us, not just me on the committee, but members of legislature telling us that, we just found out that we've been moved to another district. And that's just really, to me, that's not the way this process is supposed to work. So, you know, when Cynthia says like, we still kind of don't know, it's because the resources, even months after the process is complete, are still inadequate for us to be able to tell where our districts are. It's just ridiculous.
So if you don't know where your districts are, can you tell the public how are they supposed to know where, you know, you mentioned it's difficult to find the maps. So where should the public go if they're interested and, you know, want to find out what their new district may be, or if they're in the same old district?
So what I did was, and I tweeted it out too, you know, Twitter's a very fun place, I guess. Well, actually, Twitter's like America's bathroom wall, but you can get your map off of it, I guess. But what I did was, there's a Dave Redistricting website.
Mm-hmm.
If you take the shape files, that if you want them, I've got them. I think it's easy to get those shape files. You can take those shape files and put them into daveredistricting.com, and you can actually get a scalable version of your map. So that's what I did, and many other folks, in order to figure out kind of where the bounds of the districts, the boundaries of the districts are. So I use that app. So that's the reason why, because it also has precincts. So that's the only way I was able to kind of tell where the boundaries are. But again, the point I'm trying to make is, as frustrated as the public is, all of us were just as frustrated in the process, trying to figure out what our districts looked like, because the resources that we were provided were the same that, you know, are out there right now. And again, I'm not afraid to acknowledge that they are flat out inadequate. I mean, it's very difficult to tell. So at this point, the only way you really know is you go to our new legislative website, type your address in, and they'll tell you what district you're in. But as far as knowing the boundaries, it is a very difficult process to break down. And the maps that are provided for us right now are very, very hard to use.
The major changes in Senate District 21, of course, the Senate district grew by 20,000 in the length of 10 years, and the Tuscaloosa district, as far as the Tuscaloosa County, Senate District 21 lost Big Sandy precinct, Bobby Miller precinct, as well as Belt and McAtee. So yeah, it's Chris got a good point, is that it's hard to try to explain exactly where citizens will have to go vote on May 24th, because that's going to be, of course, we got some lawsuits going on right now, and which I do not know anything about those, but it's going to be interesting to see how everything develops.
Well, as you know, the league is all about voting and getting people out to vote and making sure they know where to go to vote. So if we can be of any assistance in helping you get the word out, please, you know, send us that information so that we can share that to make sure people know where they need to go to cast their ballot. So just keep that in mind.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, let's shift gears just a little bit. and talk about the COVID money. As we know, it's exploding again, right? So, but there's money available. So what plans do you, the legislature, what do you have, plans do you have to assist businesses and individuals with the impact and effects they have of the virus with this?
Hey, Cal, why don't you go ahead and initiate that conversation?
Thank you, Senator. Appreciate that. So I think honestly that is going to be at the forefront of this conversation when session starts next week. There have been some rumored kind of, I guess, parameters that we've kind of set, some ideas that have floated around. We're going to be looking at probably about $580 million in ARPA funds for this first tranche of monies that have been allocated to the state. Obviously, this coming summer, there will be an additional tranche of about 1.1 billion, if I'm not mistaken, to total somewhere in the 2.2 overall. So I think, based off guidance from Treasury, and some of the limited scope of some of those dollars and the allowable uses of those dollars, I think a lot of it's going to be concentrated in the areas of water and sewer projects through a fund that's already set up through ADM that those practices and those investments are already made. I think you will see us maybe kind of narrow that and make that process a little bit easier. But in addition to that, I think you will see a very big emphasis on broadband and rural broadband throughout the state and the investments made there. One of the biggest things that we've found from COVID is, there are places in the state where this Zoom call couldn't take place. And so there is going to be a distinct focus on those investments and making sure my priority is to make sure that those dollars are getting spent really where the need is, not to create redundancy. So I think we have to be careful in that. And then I think there's also in this immediate session going to be another analysis done on the needs of the hospitals and nursing homes. I do think there may be a little small portion of that carved out for rural hospitals and capital projects within those rural hospital systems that really don't have another way. And again, COVID has shown us that for the need of those rural health facilities. So I think that's pretty much the scope of it going into it. Now, I think it could be expanded beyond that come summertime, but one of the things we don't want to do is start obligating monies that we haven't received yet, for one, but obligating monies that we don't know if the rules are going to change. As we've seen, I think Treasury sent out their latest update actually today. So the rules keep moving as we go along, and we don't want to handcuff ourselves to something that maybe we could find an investment for later on. Because the one thing and the one way we have to look at this is our state budgets are in pretty good shape considering the pandemic and compared to our surrounding states. And this federal money we need to look at as a long-term generational investment for the state that's going to offer a return 10, 20, 30 years from now. So I think we've got to look heavily in those directions and make sure that there's going to be a return on our investment for our citizens.
One thing I want to mention as well is that, and Chris, you may want to jump in on this one, $400 million of the rescue money went to help finance our prison constructions, and which the federal courts has been dealing with Alabama for quite some time on this issue, and certainly it's our hope that we have started on a right path and resolving those issues.
He teed you up, Chris.
Yeah, yeah, he did. So I think, you know, AJ and I think this was a very healthy debate that occurred recently about the need and the usage of, well, the need for new prisons and the usage of the COVID money or the ARPA money to do so. And, you know, fundamentally, I think it's been a misunderstanding as far as like, you know, because I do understand the need for new facilities. I think that's a common theme because, you know, you're trying to attract new employees to work in the system, and it's very hard to do so in facilities you can't secure, and they're very dangerous in and of themselves. And also, you know, I think there's some understanding there that there needed to be some funding, and ultimately using ARPA funds probably frees up additional money later on down the road to use it for other purposes, including rehabilitative and other corrective measures. But for me, I did not vote for that bill simply because I didn't like the mindset of it, because I wanted to focus on other things before we focus on buildings, because I think we need a more comprehensive approach to the problem itself. So whether that be reform of the prison system, of our sentencing, or reform of the pardons and parole system, other measures first before we decide to build buildings, because I think some of our colleagues, and you know, present company included or not, I don't know. Me and Kyle argued about this a couple of times, but I think some people think that building prisons becomes the answer for every question, and it's not true. Building prisons doesn't answer any question. Building prisons becomes part of the solution, not the solution. So if you're talking about corruption in the system, building buildings is not going to stop corruption. If you're talking about abusing incarcerated people, buildings are not going to stop that. So we need, and I'm you know, I wasn't a fan of the prior commissioner. I think a good start was, you know, replacing him with a new person. But he's got a mountain of a task ahead of him, because a large percentage of the culture there is entrenched because we keep recycling the same people over and over again, and we continue to get the same results. So ultimately, somebody who's in charge, if this is a long-term appointment for John Hamm, or short-term or interim appointment, or whatever you want to call it, it's going to take a significant amount of work to change the culture of the Department of Corrections. It's going to take a significant amount of work to change the culture of the Bureau of Pardons and Paroles. And those things are going to be required in order to make sure that, you know, as I say a lot, we don't put old problems in new buildings. So, but again, fundamentally, spending the $400 million on prisons may ultimately bear fruit in the sense that it'll free up dollars in our general fund for other projects that are related to the Department of Corrections, not limited to, but we're just getting ready to pay what, $50–60 million for, in terms of investing in rehabilitative services and in the old Perry County facility now, since it's been there for years and we just now are getting around to getting to it. But our ability to create other rehabilitative measures for those who are getting ready to be released. So fundamentally, I didn't agree with the spending the money, but it's not like I don't understand the need for new facilities, and also trying to figure out different ways to pay for them.
Ms. Kim, sorry we hijacked your question there on the ARPA funds, but this does play into it. And while Chris and I didn't agree on all those points throughout that debate back in the fall, I think the buildings are a major part of it, but also I think they help with some of those other issues indirectly, whether it be the style and the design of the old facilities being more dormitory style and not being able to segregate the populations within the prisons and those kinds of things. So while I fully realize that it's not the solution, it's definitely a big part of the solution. And so, you know, I was happy that we kind of took that step in that direction. This is something that's been talked about for longer than I've been on the earth in Alabama. And I'm glad we took steps in the right direction, in my opinion. And I think one thing that got confused a lot while we were having that conversation, since your question was towards the ARPA funds and those kinds of things, is that the portion of ARPA funds that we spent for prisons was a part of a calculation of lost revenue. So there was a formula by which we came up with how much revenue in tax receipts has the state lost directly due to the COVID pandemic. And that's where those dollars came from, not out of something else that had more stringent rules and regulations with.
Okay, great. That's perfect. Actually, we had planned to talk about that later, so we just went ahead and covered that right now. But following up on the COVID money, and you mentioned the sort of needs of rural healthcare and how COVID has really highlighted that even more, how they're in dire straits. Could any of this money be spent to expand Medicaid, which could, as long-term perhaps, help with healthcare in general, rural healthcare in particular?
Chris, you want me to start with that?
Yes, sir. I think we're going to end up at the same place anyway. So
yeah, I honestly think that we're to a point where in the near future, it almost happened last month, Medicaid is going to get expanded for us without anything that we do. It was in the Build Back Better plan. That was even the scaled down version of that at the federal level. That would have expanded it all the way up to the 130% mark. I just, it's a zero premium tax credit based type program. I think within the year, that's probably a moot conversation.
So Alabama won't have to expend any funds.
You will eventually have to expand funds, but I think it's going to be tied into our current Medicaid program one way or the other.
yeah, I think one of the things that needs to be, I guess, made clearer in that conversation is it's when you're expanding Medicaid, it's not exactly increasing an appropriation, it's expanding, it's increasing a number of people that are eligible for it. So that's what triggers the additional appropriation. And so it's not necessarily like we're just spending upfront money. What we ends up happening is somebody who was on the cusp of it now becomes eligible when they weren't before. The first few years of that investment, the federal government covers a good portion of it, but as the years go by, the state's responsibility increases. But I think it's important to note that in Alabama, I think we've expanded Medicaid to a certain extent over the last few years because more and more people, as a result of federal government activity, have gotten health insurance. And I also think it's very important to point out that in Alabama, every child has health insurance. So in its purest sense, that's that's almost like expanding Medicaid in the sense that every time a child is born in Alabama, they have health care. So I think that's something that we need to continue to stress. And as Kyle said, over the next couple of years, I don't think that's going to be a discussion piece anymore.
And to Chris's point about the childhood Medicaid services, all kids, we're one of the only states that fully funds that program. So we are making that investment in our kids when they're most vulnerable and those kinds of things. So I think that's one thing to keep in mind as we have those conversations.
Okay, great. So kind of sticking with the COVID theme, there are two pre-filed bills, it's my understanding, HB 18 and HB 31. one restricts the use of masks and one prohibits discrimination based on immunization status. If I could get some thoughts on those, if you support those, have any general thoughts?
Who wants to go first?
I'll start with that one.
Yeah, me and Kyle are doing all the talking, man.
Hey, well, you all are doing a great job. You know,
I'll keep that. Can I record that, AJ?
oh yeah, you can record it. It's just I'm not gonna say it again. And with promise, I don't care what they see on this YouTube or on this tape. Are you gonna believe me or your lying ears or eyes? That's the way it is. But you know, I'm one that have a hard time trying to figure out what part of science people don't understand. And, you know, a simple process would be to wear a mask. That, if nothing else, that prevents you from having what I have to a great extent, or me getting what you have. So I think if nothing else, you know, we need to talk about and look at masks. Now, in terms of mandating it, if I have a business and I want to try and keep my doors open, then I don't need someone telling me that I can't mandate this for the people that I'm spending my money to pay. You know, now I know it's you're talking about a state or a federal mandate, but we have to look at it also from the revenue side of this thing. If we are losing people in the workforce because and productivity within the workforce, because people are having to stay out for 10 days, 5 days, 15 days, whatever, that's costing our businesses money. And so we need to make sure that we are putting in place, and as a business owner, you worry about not having the backup of the law and of the government when you need to make a decision that will help your business. If the federal government or the state is saying we can't have any mandates, or we can't mandate this, but I'm losing productivity time with my people, then, you know, it's costing me money. So I'm in favor of mandates, if indeed that's what we've got to have in order to be able to keep our doors open. Vaccine mandates, I think the federal government has done as good a job as you possibly can in terms of giving you an option. That option is either you decide you're going to receive the vaccine, or you have to be subjected to you know, testing on a regular basis. To me, that only makes sense. And I know there are a lot of people aren't going to like to hear it. We are going to talk about is taking away our freedoms to make a decision, but you're also taking away the freedom of those that make the responsible decisions to have a society in which they can live without the problem of continued COVID. I heard Kyle say we're gonna have it with us forever. Believe it or not, we probably have already had it forever here with us. The problem is it has just manifested itself in a manner that we are not have been blessed to even have a vaccine. And you know, the other thing I don't understand is the vaccine was developed under one president's reign and distributed under another. So my question to everybody that's listening and probably want to write me and tell me about it, what's the problem? Let's get it done and get vaccinated and, you know, see if we can't get this pandemic that Kyle says is going to stay with us forever. See if we can't get it under control and get it to leave us. All right, jump on me, Kyle.
I want to jump in.
Come on.
I am not for the mandates. We'll be open and upfront about that, but I don't think codifying things is the place for that decision to be made. I think that decision is going to be made in the courts. I think it's going to be done in a pretty timely fashion, it sounds like. And beyond that, with HB 31, I think what we have to be careful with there is picking one job over another. Yes, I think everybody deserves the right to be employed and those kinds of things. But in the case, I'll give you an example. In the case of a federal contractor, if we passed HB 31 in its current form, we're picking those that are not vaccinated, and we're taking up for them. And I think we should to some extent. But at the same time, we are putting those federal contracts at risk, which would do away with every one of those jobs. And so I think we have to be very, very careful picking winners and losers when it comes to those employees. So not for it. The court's the place for that to be decided. I think we did what we could do in codifying the exemptions that were already on the federal books at the state level and given an appeals process, those kinds of things. And we need to see how that plays out in the near term in the court system.
You know, I agree with with AJ. Well, because employers already discriminate against employees who in their opinion don't adopt good health protocol. For example, if you smoke and it's likely going to cost your insurer more money, they charge you more. If you don't take advantage of wellness programs that will reduce the amount of money that you may cost an employer health-wise, they punish you. And I think the science has indicated to all of us, basically proven to all of us, that if you are vaccinated, you're not likely to get as sick, you're not likely to end up in the hospital, and ultimately you're going to cost an employer and an insurer less money. So I'm not sure that we want to codify in any way control measures on businesses that do what they believe is best for their employees in their business. So if an employer wants to adopt a principle where they say you can't work here unless you're vaccinated, many employers do that anyway, already, right now, for various diseases. And also, it's concerning masks. If an employer wants to determine for his employees that I want you to wear a mask, who are we to say that that employer is wrong? Especially if they can come to you and justify the cost, they can conduct a cost benefit analysis in real time and show you that vaccinated employees save them money. I think that's a very reasonable position to take. And also, I'm going to use this as an opportunity to tell people to go get vaccinated. Every day, as members of the legislative delegation, we get an update from our local hospital concerning the amount of people who are at that hospital who are dealing with COVID. And over the last week we were under 10, and we've seen massive increases. And to the day, there are 70 people in our hospital right now dealing with COVID in different stages. Some are in ICU, some have been admitted to be treated. The large majority of those individuals who are there, who are sick and also in ICU, are unvaccinated individuals. So I'm just going to say it. You need to go get vaccinated. And, you know, I don't care what you're talking. People tell you that, you know, it doesn't keep you from getting a disease, blah, blah, blah. Don't listen to that. Don't fall for the banana in the tailpipe. Go get vaccinated. because it could potentially be the difference between you living or dying from this disease, or living or suffering from a significant illness and being sick for an extended period of time. So for me, increase the odds of your survival, increase the odds of this being a minimal experience for you, and go take the vaccine. And, government mandate or not, nobody should have to tell you to do what's best for you and your family. Go get it, go take it, and take care of yourself and your people.
Okay, does anybody else want to weigh in on that? Okay, if not, we will move on. So let's talk about education just a little bit. Gosh, I've got so many questions to ask you. So you have many retired educators and retirees to be that live in your districts. And last year, the Education Retirees Trust Fund was established, but no money was allocated to it. So this year, it's my understanding there's historic revenue available in the Education Trust Fund. Will funds be allocated to that retiree trust fund?
I'll answer real quick if y'all are okay with that. I don't think it will go to the trust fund. I think it's going to go as a direct appropriation to retirees in the state. What that number looks like right now, I don't know, but I feel certain that there will be an appropriation for retirees in this cycle. And also to note, there were conversations last year about a funding mechanism for that trust fund. I know there were a lot of talks about gaming, those kinds of things, and you may be getting to that later. But there were talks about funding sources through whatever gaming legislation might come, whether it be winnings that go unclaimed or something like that, which believe it or not is a pretty big source of funds. So I think that there are ideas floating out there to create a revenue stream for that fund. We're not there yet, but I think in the meantime we'll see an appropriation this legislative session.
Okay. All right. Anybody else have any comments about that? Okay. Another education related question. Alabama, like many other states, is experiencing a teacher shortage. A recent report by the Alabama Commission on Higher Education found that over half of the participants in the survey were thinking of or planning to leave within the next 5 years. So some reasons were inadequate retirement benefits, salary, work environment, work resources. What, if anything, can the legislature do to address this situation?
I think we've actually, and correct me if I'm wrong, but there are several proposals that are actually coming up in this upcoming legislative session to deal with our teacher retention problem. Salary-wise, we were becoming more competitive, but we are losing teachers because our retirement package and so forth isn't competitive with our neighboring states. So I think you're going to see some investment in bonuses. I think that's been talked about. I think there's also going to be some investment to trying to make our retirement package so we can retain our teachers a little bit more attractive. But we have to be honest. I mean, that teacher shortage is something that's actually been more exposed in our COVID times because of, we've actually been in situations where we're putting people in a classroom that aren't teachers to make up for some of the shortage that we have. But more specifically, we also have shortages in math and science teachers. So we're also going to have to direct funding and appropriate money directly to individuals that are interested in becoming a math and science teacher in Alabama. And I think that's also been something that has been discussed recently too. So I think that you'll see a large percentage of the money that because I think our education trust fund budget this session is at a record level. I do think you'll see some of that money being redirected towards retention and also specifically for math and science teachers.
And you may also,
Go ahead,
you
Daryl.
may, yes, sir. The reading initiative, I think you're going to see some attention paid to that program as well. So Chris has got it right, math and science, and then at the same time you'll have the reading initiative issue as well. Yeah.
Well, just to piggyback some of what Chris said, we made a huge investment in math and science teachers last year. Unfortunately, this is not an Alabama problem. This is a national problem, teacher shortage. I mean, I think it's more, we see it, it's highlighted maybe more so here. But 52% of our math and science teachers are not certified to teach the area of subject matter that they're teaching. So that is a huge problem. And I think for too long, how we got there, I think for too long, we over incentivized people to move into administration, and we took our best teachers out of the classroom. And so we're having to reevaluate how we fund that and pay those teachers. So math and science, obviously, we put a big emphasis on last year. I think one thing that we also have to note and be very careful with and cognizant of is while we have record ETF levels of revenues this year, a lot of that is not, in my opinion, or what I want to call real money. That's the federal government stimulating a lot of our economy directly or indirectly. And we have to be sure that we have some awareness of that and make sure that we're not obligating things down the road that we're not going to have the revenues to cover. And so I think we have to be very, very careful of that. I think there's some ideas of how much of that money is in the economy locally and how much is being cycled through, but it's something to be very careful of.
I think one of the other things that we have to consider when we talk about retention of our educators and things of that nature. The other thing that COVID has taught us is the employee is now not just considered a commodity, but is considered a vital part of the success of any of our businesses or our education system. We have a situation where we are competing with our surrounding states for teachers. And that was even prior to COVID. But what COVID has done is we are now also competing, the education for our teachers, we're also competing with the businesses in our community, because we are finding that our educators a lot of them are moving into the business world because of the opportunities that are presenting themselves, because our businesses are seeking the brightest that we have in our community. So not only are we competing as a state, competing with the surrounding states for our educators, but we are competing with the businesses within our state for our educators as well.
Yes, going back to what Kyle alluded to about the budgets, prior year budgeting process that we enacted several years ago has worked quite well, because the EPL, the Education Trust Fund, hasn't had a prorated budget since then. And with the influx of the government money coming in because of the COVID, it is, Cal's got it right. We've got to be careful on this, because there's going to be a downside to this if we're not careful and planning in the right manner. So I think I think Kyle brought up a good point on that. So we're very fortunate in Alabama that we haven't had a prorated budget, and I think it's a testament to the leadership for each of you colleagues as well.
I would just add that, I think this is Cynthia's uneducated guess, but these problems probably are here to stay in the terms of the teacher shortages and I think the good side of all this is it creates a sense of urgency to force us to address probably the number one issue in our state, and that is our education system that really, really needs overhauling. I know we've tried various things over many years now, but the bottom line is still the bottom line, and we are not performing well. And so the only good thing about a crisis like this is it forces you to really concentrate on it and to act. I'm really proud of what the legislature did last year with the math and science money, the funding there, and the initiatives they started. And hopefully it will keep us focused long enough to really move the needle and fund our teachers the way we're going to have to fund them if we're going to keep them. And there's no really higher calling for our money than to pay our teachers and educate our children. So hopefully it will do some good.
Great, thank you. So Senator Allen, we would
Yes.
like to find out some more information from you about two bills that you pre-filed, SB 1 and SB 2, concerning firearms. So could you clarify how those will make us safer as citizens?
SB 1 is the constitutional carry piece of legislation, which I've introduced for several years. And currently, for instance, if you go purchase a gun at a gun shop, you would automatically go through a very extensive federal background check. And for you to carry that gun home to your personal property or to your place of business, you would not need a permit. Of course, currently you can open carry. You can open carry in Alabama, so that's something that's been there since I'm not sure of the date, 1885, 86, but the piece of legislation on SB 1 is to be able to fulfill your constitutional right. Because the Second Amendment was given for a purpose. It's not a privilege. It's a right that was given to us by our founding fathers, and you should not have to pay a fee to be able to fulfill your right to carry. Now, there again, the bill is very clear. It's that it's not going to prohibit or quit or stop the process of a permit, because I'm a permit, carrier. I've got a permit, and but it's one of those things that I feel like that you do not have to pay a fee to fulfill your constitutional right to protect yourself, your family, and your properties. So that's the real basics of the SB 1. SB 2 is a piece that deals with the overreach of the federal government. But the federal government should not have any say-so on how Alabama conducts its business in terms of firearms and ammo. And so that's what SB 2 does.
And so, but how will that make us safer as a?
Well, most likely, you got the law-abiding citizens who respect the rule of law. Those are the individuals that that you do not have to worry about. The ones that you have to be concerned about is those individuals that don't respect the rule of law and purchase weapons in the black market, underground market, or wherever, you know. So it's not the citizens who respect the law enforcement or respects the rule of law and respect each other. And it's in fact, states who have passed the constitutional carry, those individuals who continue to purchase the permits. And the bill, SB 1, does not do away with that at all. It just gives the citizens the opportunity to not have to purchase a permit. But if you travel across the country, then certainly it's one of those kind of things that you would like to have, because most states will honor the Alabama permits. But the SB 1 does not do away with permits.
Okay. Any other? I'll give everyone an opportunity if anybody else wants to say anything about that.
Sure, just real quick. Just want to make sure we understand that the permit process is distinct, because you can't open carry in Alabama, but when you put a gun in a car, it's considered concealed. So, and if you're in law enforcement and you see a weapon in a car, there are different standards in terms of how you can ask or discuss that weapon. If every gun in a car is deemed concealed, that means that the officer that approaches the vehicle can ask a question about you and your possession. So what that means is, on a traffic stop, first question I ask you, if you have a gun, yes or no. Do you have a permit? Yes or no. If you don't have one, it gives the officer the ability to confiscate that weapon. On the other hand, if you don't have a permit requirement, a police officer on that traffic stop is very limited in terms of what sort of questioning they can have. So a lot of law enforcement officers are very leery because they feel uncomfortable with how not having a permit requirement limits them on traffic stops in determining who has a weapon and who doesn't. Also, the constitutional carry component of this, what we do now is already constitutional. The Supreme Court in the Heller case, Justice Scalia said that the Second Amendment is not a blanket permission slip that the government can limit possession by status, can limit possession by location, and also it's been cleared by the courts on several occasions that you can also require permits. So I think one fundamental thing that we need to remember about the Constitution is there's no right that's enumerated in the Constitution is sacrosanct. Every right in the Constitution, whether it be the right to vote, or the right to possess firearms, right to privacy, and so forth, has limits. And those limits are generated by the public safety and welfare of the public. So, for example, if you've been convicted of a crime that involves violence, your right to possess a firearm can be taken away from you. Your right to vote can be taken away from you, because we understand that there are certain limited circumstances where rights need to be limited. One of the things that the federal government decided many years ago, and one of the things that we adopted as a state, is that if you've been convicted of domestic violence or you have a protection from abuse order pending against you, that your right to possess a firearm can be taken away from you. And there's a reason for that, because if you demonstrated a propensity for violence, the last thing we want you to have in your possession is a firearm. Or if you've demonstrated a propensity to commit violence against your spouse or your significant other, you should be limited in how and when and where you can possess a firearm. And the reason that I feel like permits are necessary to a certain degree is because if you have to go back every year and renew your pistol permit, that's another opportunity to make sure that you haven't done anything wrong that should determine whether or not you should be able to possess a firearm. And the thing about the law-abiding citizen component of that is everybody's a law-abiding citizen until they're not. And we don't want to figure out that you aren't a law-abiding citizen when you do something crazy with that firearm. So I don't think there's any reason why we should limit the amount of opportunities that we take as law enforcement and as the public to make sure that people who possess a firearm can do so reasonably and respectfully, and also aren't a danger to themselves or other people. So while I do respect Senator Allen's position, and also I think we all respect the right to carry a firearm, we also have to acknowledge that it is not without regulation. It is not without, and it is not without its constitutional limits on the way you exercise that right. And I think that we have to make sure that we balance public safety with the right to possess and use firearms.
All right, let me just add this, just to reiterate something, is that SB 1 does not do away with you as a citizen to purchase a permit. In fact, states has passed constitutional carry. They have maintained those permit sales. Even some states has increased their permit sales. So make sure you understand that SB 1 will not do away with permits. In fact, we'll be able to see exactly what takes place once we do pass SB 1, and we'll maintain those permits.
No, I agree. So I mean, 100%. It does not take away that responsibility, but it does change who has to get one, and it also takes away the requirement that you have to have a permit in state to take a weapon from point A to point B in your vehicle. Where right now, if you carry a weapon in your vehicle and you are not permitted to carry it, you have to secure it away from the driver, whether that be in the trunk or somewhere where it's not within arm's reach, which is why I understand why law enforcement is very leery of this piece of legislation. Because again, it changes the nature of the interaction between law enforcement and a driver of a vehicle in one of the most dangerous situations you can be in when you're a police officer or a sheriff or a trooper, which is on a traffic stop on the side of the road with somebody you don't know. And oftentimes those tragic situations, the ability to inquire about a permit or see a gun in a vehicle and inquire about it and take it if necessary can save the life of an officer. And we've seen situations where those sorts of situations where somebody can be intercepted because they see that illegal firearm, they can be stopped from doing something even more tragic when an officer can intervene and when necessary and seize that weapon.
I think during this conversation, obviously it's a very passionate conversation on both sides. But your question about public safety and those kinds of things, I do think we took a positive step last year with the lifetime permit bill in that we created a database for all law enforcement of prohibited individuals. So that was one thing that we kept hearing among the law enforcement world is, while we may know who they are in Fayette County, Tuscaloosa County doesn't know who those individuals are in Fayette County. And so we put it all into one basically place for all that information to be compiled and everybody to be able to access within the state on the law enforcement side. So I do think we've taken positive steps in that regard. So I think that has to play into this conversation as we get to debating it in the next month or so.
And I want to point out, as Kyle mentioned, we actually passed several of this legislation over the last few years in a bipartisan way. So I don't think it's impossible for us to sit at a table across from each other, recognize the importance of public safety, and also recognize the importance of constitutional rights, and come together and actually solve a problem. Because for a long time, we had a very incomplete database when it dealt with individuals whose right to possess was taken away because they had a mental disease or defect. There were many people who were matriculating to the system who were deemed to be a danger to themselves or others, where there was not a database where we were collecting that information so that other law enforcement officers who approach that individual would know that that person could be dangerous. And we closed that loophole. And I think with the bill that was passed last year specifically will give us more information to know who our officers are dealing with on the side of the road. I think that's crucial considering how dangerous that job can be at times.
Well, and I think those databases may have existed, but they were in silos. It
Right.
wasn't shared information. And so technically we didn't create anything new. We just put everybody on the same platform.
But it's going to take us though, because our history with Aaliyah and keeping databases is not the best. So it's going to take us a real significant investment to make sure that not only do we give them a requirement, but we give them the tools to do it. Because right now, for example, if you ask them about their expunged record database, it's anybody's guess. Also, if you ask them about their ability to produce the IDs that we required them to produce years ago, anybody's guess. So we need to make sure that if we give them a responsibility, we give them the ability to do it.
And I think you'll see that budget request reflected in the budgets this year.
Well, you're the money man, so you know.
I don't know about that. Bill left. No offense, Cynthia. he was in charge of the pocketbook.
Well, we are almost at the end of our time. And like I said, I had so many questions, but this has been a great conversation. But in just our last few minutes, I would like to kind of just go around and see if what your thoughts are, if we missed something that you think is going to be a, big topic, kind of just get your quick, minute or so if you have something. So Representative Almond, we'll start with you at the bottom and I'll work my way up.
Well, as I said at the beginning, this will be my first regular session. So I have no idea what to expect, except that for a little bit I've been there already, and I'm so excited about the opportunity to be there. I think we certainly hit on many of the important topics. Perhaps one we didn't speak about was mental health issues, which are obviously very important to Tuscaloosa, everywhere, but especially to Tuscaloosa, given our population here. And I'm hopeful that we can reapply and perhaps be awarded a mental health, I don't know what we're calling these things, crisis centers, yes, in our city or county, because it's definitely much needed. So that's something I'd like to, help emphasize this coming year.
Okay, thank you. And Senator Allen?
Yes, I do think AJ mentioned something moments ago. I think it's very important as far as workforce. You're gonna see a lot of discussion on workforce and how we can tweak and improve what we're doing. I think the program that we have statewide is very good, and I think you're going to see some new ideas come to the front and maybe improve that. And then at the same time, mental health issues, like Cynthia mentioned as well. I think you're going to see a discussion on guidance counselors in our schools and making sure that the administration will have some assistance with some form of guidance counselors that can monitor and help with the mental health issues that faces our students and faculty statewide. So I think the budgets is going to be, again, a very good, strong focus point on developing hopefully a pay raise for our employees statewide. So that's something that I'm looking forward to as well. Those are just some major points. I could share some others, but I think those are ones I feel like is very important.
Okay, thank you. And Representative McCampbell? If he's still there, he's muted.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay. I really think that this year we are going to have to take a lot of inventory of how our elections are run, and a lot of inventory of whether or not we are going to be a nation and a state that wants, to encourage participation in the voting process. So I do think we'll be seeing a lot of movement in that direction. So that's about the only thing I can think of right now.
Okay, thank you so much. And Representative Sapp?
First and foremost, Kim, thank you. Thank the league for having us. This is something that we look forward to each and every year. And like the back and forth that we're allowed to have in this setting. And so it's fun, challenging, even have to sharpen up on the notes and all that kind of stuff leading into session. So appreciate the opportunity for that. But I think for me, the focus on the dollars that we have to spend and the long-term investments that need to be made in this very kind of narrow window that we have to make those investments and to see a return on those investments long-term, whether it be a one-time expenditure to create a crisis center, as Cynthia was talking about, or some of those other one-time expenditures that will create a lasting effect on our citizens. So we've got to be careful. Not all that money is real, and we don't want to get in a situation where we're in proration 3 years from now because we've overspent. But I do think there are some real opportunities that we need to seize in the short term.
Thank you. And Representative England?
I want to echo what Kyle said. This is something that we all look forward to every year. And believe it or not, the conversations that you see that occur here also occur behind the scenes as well. We talk often. We talk issues like this often, especially for local issues. And just as Cynthia mentioned about mental health, I'm proud to say that as a delegation, and also when Cynthia was a member of the city council and as president of the city council, we've been fighting on this issue for decades. And to be honest with you, considering that this is the epicenter of mental health in the state of Alabama, because I mean, every facility that where people come to, whether it be federal or state, it's right here in the city of Tuscaloosa. So we're going to hopefully continue to see movement in that regard and hopefully get a crisis center, because we most certainly need one. But as far as this upcoming session is concerned, you will see, I think you'll see a significant discussion once again about gambling. There has been some discussion about it already. There's been some movement on all the interested parties coming together, trying to figure out a way to work around some of the fundamental issues that have kept us apart and kept the bill from materializing in our last few sessions. So I think there will be some discussion there. But I think the primary driver of this session is what Kyle said, is we're going to have to figure out a way to responsibly and effectively spend over $1 billion. And as you know, Alabama has a myriad of issues, including whether we talk about criminal justice reform or infrastructure, or we've been made aware of water and sewer issues in the Black Belt. So you're going to see, and also the fact that when Kyle said something very on point earlier, is that there are areas in the state of Alabama where we could not do what we're doing right now. So I think you're going to see a lot of discussion about the best way to spend that money and really determine what Alabama's priorities are and how to best spend that money to make sure that we meet the needs that the people have. But other than that, again, this is one of the best things that we do. And we really appreciate the fact that y'all give us this platform to meet our constituents and also talk about issues together. Let me tell you, there are places in the state of Alabama that you can't do this. Trust me. At least
Gagging,
your
Gagging,
broadband
Alabama is
connectivity.
one. Gagging is
And
one
hey, look.
unless you're willing to pay over $100 a month for it.
Oh, hold on now. Hold on. When I say there's places in the state you can't use, I ain't talking about broadband. I'm talking about them folks hate each other. They hate each other. So, but you wouldn't make it an hour and a half with them just talking. So,
Well, thank
this
you.
is a
Thank you
blessing.
so much. We really appreciate it. We appreciate the opportunity. I'm sure, I know your constituents love to hear from you. And so good luck with the upcoming session. And I thank you. Oh, and it will be available on our YouTube channel if anyone wants to rewatch it later. So thank you so much. Have a great evening.
Thank you,
Thank
guys.
you. Thanks for having us.